Hello and welcome to Telefrag. In today's episode, we check out the seizure-inducing Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And there's a news segment.
Guitar Hero, milked to death. Call of Duty, rubbish. Mortal Kombat, violent. Where's the camera?
But first, we take a test drive Unlimited 2.
Well done. This license allows access to new events. A new championship is now accessible. You just need to follow your GPS to get there. Good luck.
Thank you for your advice, Todd.
If you're looking for a title that is overly ambitious and under-delivers in almost every aspect, then this open-world driving game / douchebag simulator from Eden Games may be right up your alley.
They've tried to make the player feel like they're part of an elite club set somewhere in Ibiza or Hawaii. It's all about the social aspects, and indeed leveling up socially is quite important. Is quite an important part of the game. You can get haircuts and cosmetic surgery and all sorts of really weird things within the game, and it rewards you for essentially being a pretty plastic sort of a person. And the driving style and the races and the commentary and the cinematics are all tied into that as well. Everything that you do within the game when you're racing, you're talking to people, it's all part of this whole solar challenge that you're given in order to win races and achieve money, gain money and achieve notoriety. But in actual fact, the style of the game hasn't really changed too much from the first one. And when we played the first one a few years back, we always thought that it was a really great game. There was a lot of potential there. But the sequel is supposed to enhance and build on the foundations of the first one. It really hasn't. It's just they've just added a whole bunch of stuff in there, unnecessary stuff that really hasn't improved the game at all.
Part of the problems faced by Test Drive Unlimited 2 is that it has a lot of content for you to complete in your quest to become Magnum PI Junior. Only the majority of it is either tedious or lacking in any real incentive to finish.
There's very little to do once you get outside of the tasks that you're provided in the game. This is not Grand Theft Auto. This is a fairly simple game. You head out into the country and you look at the terrain again, not very well detailed. You might find a hidden wreck somewhere, and they'll give you a bonus for finding a wreck. Apart from that, you'll come across dealerships and perhaps a new place to get your haircut, a new car wash, whatever. It's not really very inspired. It just seems to be so close to being a game that you could spend dozens of hours in and yet fall short in pretty much every regard.
Driving and racing, the core aspect of the title, aren't without their own set of difficulties.
Because the graphics are, again, back to the graphics, are really sort of about 5 years old in a lot of ways, you're not really sure of the texture of the road when you're driving on it, and you can enter into a corner and you'll discover it's got some kind of shut off over the hill, and by that stage it's too late, you're out into the field and all the cars was passed and you restart the challenge. This happens a lot. It's sort of like a cheat death, really. It's pretty inexcusable in 2011.
Where have you been? Do you know how long I've been waiting?
We've talked a lot about what's bad about the game. Let's look at what's good about the game. The vehicle models, in-game vehicle models, the ones that you can buy and the ones that you race, and the AI ones, are actually quite good. They look good. It's pleasing to the eye. I like the fact that every single time you enter a championship and you have a series of races, that it's mixed up a little bit, and on top of that, the tracks are usually new. You very rarely repeat the same track that you're racing on. And I think that's great. And compared to the likes of Gran Turismo 5, where you're playing a lot of the same tracks over and over, this is really quite different. The tracks are basic, the checkpoints are located averagely and all the rest of it, but in actual fact the game itself, when you're playing on these tracks that the game has generated, it's actually quite enjoyable. The handling model for the driving is difficult, it's hard to master, but when you actually do get it, when you actually click and you have this moment where you're maybe doing 100 miles an hour and you slide into a checkpoint and you pass the line a tenth of a second ahead of your competitor, the game's brilliant. At that it excels. But there's just not enough of it. It just doesn't happen enough to really capture your attention in the game.
Test Drive Unlimited 2 was a game that many wanted to see perform well. Eden Games just weren't up to the task.
So really what you're looking at is Eden, the people that made the game, they're really trying very hard, and the word that always springs to mind with this title is ambitious. And they're really ambitious when it comes to it, but ultimately they've just missed that level of quality that you would expect for the type of game that it pretends to be.
And a final word for those of you that have put off a game purely for superficial reasons.
if you get beyond the whole problem with the graphics and look at the core fundamentals of the game, there's plenty of other reasons to not buy it based on that.
And now some news.
So news this week, Guitar Hero is dead, it's finished, over and done with.
Okay, well that's not particularly surprising given, I mean, how badly Activision milked that franchise. They released, what, 5 games in 2009?
Yeah, and those 5 games, all of their sales combined equaled the sales for 2008, which was just World Tour, that's all they released then.
That's shocking. I mean, you consider how well they could have done if they'd gone the DLC route like they do with the other titles that they're experimenting with that in, and how each of those full-price games could have very easily been a DLC pack and they would have kept their core audience.
Yeah, in the same way that Harmonix has done with Rock Band.
I mean, they just burnt their audience. And I mean, it's something that Activision are kind of getting worse and worse at. You look at Call of Duty, which, I mean, while it's still selling well, the Treyarch titles have no innovation whatsoever.
Yeah.
And the Infinity Ward ones, I mean, with Infinity Ward gone now, there's a sort of a weakness in the market there, I guess, I think.
And into EA with Battlefield. I mean, we've seen Battlefield 3, the new trailer released this week, and that's looking fantastic. And they could really position themselves to swoop in there and take some of Call of Duty's audience.
It's a franchise with a lot of support behind it. I mean, it kind of died for a while there after Battlefield 2, but Bad Company 2's picked up a lot of gamers. And hopefully Battlefield 3 will unify, I guess, the hardcore original Battlefield players with the newer, sort of smaller realm players.
Yeah, and other news this week, Mortal Kombat refused rating in Australia. It can't be sold there. In fact, I've got the press release here. The highly anticipated video game Mortal Kombat, published by Warner Brothers in Australia, has been refused classification by the Australian Classification Board and will not release in Australia. We're extremely disappointed that Mortal Kombat, one of the world's oldest and most successful video game franchises, will not be available to mature Australian gamers. They go on to say, Warner Brothers would not market mature content where it is not appropriate for the audience. We understand that not all content is for every audience, but there is an audience for mature gaming content and it would make more sense to have the R18 classification in Australia. Some pretty strong words there from Warner's.
That is some pretty strong words, also a lot of shit. But I mean, I thought Australia were finally sort of taking steps towards getting an R18 rating. I thought Atkinson had sort of backed off a bit and it was finally going to happen.
No, it's been delayed again, mate.
Again?
Due to a resurgence in popularity of the fighting game genre, Capcom, who are widely considered King of Fighters 94, have released the straight-to-console sequel of the mega-popular Marvel vs. Capcom 2. The succinctly titled Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds is a hyperkinetic tag battler which features a roster of notable and not so notable characters from the Marvel and Capcom universes. Disappointingly for fans of either franchise, in many areas, MVC3:FTW feels like a bit of a missed opportunity.
The single player game is there. There is sort of a storyline, there's some comic book sort of rendered endings, that sort of thing, but really you're not learning a lot. It's not as deep as the previous game. And they had an opportunity there to have a lot of fun with it, given how bizarre the Capcom and Marvel universes are. They could have had some hilarious sort of tie-ins and storylines, but they've gone for a very, very basic couple of quips from the character who's vanquished the final boss sort of stuff. There's no real story mode, there's no sort of background fleshed out as such. If you don't intend to play online and compete in the ranked matches and that sort of thing, in terms of value for money, it's a little bit shallow. There's not as much as Street Fighter 4 or some of the other games that are out there in terms of fighting games. Certainly the Mortal Kombats always have obscure modes and RPG modes, and I remember Puzzle Combat, for example. Tekken Bowl is another good example where you get something more than just your fighting game. Marvel vs. Capcom 3, not so much. You get training mode, online mode, and you get missions, which is realistically just another training mode. So it's lacking for content in that regard, but it's always really been the two-player game. It's one of those games that's always out at the arcade and there's people going at it. It's a lot of fun with a mate on the couch sort of stuff, so that's really where the target market is multiplayer and online.
A lacking single-player experience is a pretty major disappointment in our books, but as Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is all about fighting, fairly robust multiplayer features would more than make up for a lacking in other areas.
But the challenge really is that if you are playing an opponent that is quite far away, you will struggle to beat them because it's such a fast-paced game that lag really isn't a huge effect on the way it works out. If you're playing someone across town, it'll be fine. If you're playing someone in Australia, it's not too bad. If you're playing someone in America, there's going to be huge lags and the game will sort of pause and stutter, and in terms of timing and pulling off combos and things like that, it's really too difficult.
Nothing new there then. More so than other titles where players of different skill sets are still able to enjoy playing against each other, the combat mechanics of MVC3 require you to be much closer in ability to that of your opponents to stand a chance. A spectator mode could have done much to aid player improvement, but almost criminally, Capcom overlooked this feature. I hope you enjoy sitting in a lobby.
I think with any fighting game, there's really a 12-month period where you have the game starts off as new and obviously reaches the height of its popularity. One of the benefits of, say, the Tekken series was they were always out at the arcades first, so you could go down to, the arcades in Queen Street and play against people who were fans of the game. You could sit there and watch them and just observe. One of the key features missing from Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is actually a spectator function for the multiplayer games. So you can't sit in the game and watch what other people are doing. And I think it's a big disappointment, because one of the best ways to learn was to watch other people and watch their moves. See the combos they're strung together and then emulate that yourself. Now when you can't spectate, you're flying blind, so when you go into a match, the only way you see the combos that work are the ones that are beating you. And you're sort of slightly distracted because you're already trying to counter or think of a new move to deal with that.
Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds is a beautiful, fluid game that is a lot of fun, and if you're willing to put in the effort, something that's worth mastering. But it's sorely lacking in features that would justify the $130 price tag.
Is it fun? Yeah, it's good. I mean, certainly if you were to rent it for a weekend, you'd love it. If you're a huge fan of the series, it's probably worth purchasing. If you're a fighting game fan and you have all the fighting sticks and that sort of enthusiasm for those kind of titles, definitely worth adding to the roster. If you're just a casual gamer looking for a fighting game, I think you'll have fun, but I think there's more depth to be had in other titles.
Cowabunga, dudes.
It's a lot of fun going at it with a mate on the couch.